Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm Adrian Danila, your host, and this is Multifamily Chronicles. Our guest today is John Casmon. John has founded Casmon Capital Group. Welcome to the show, John.
Adrian, thank you for having me today. It's exciting to be here on the Multifamily Chronicles show and ready to jump into things with you.
John, would you please let us in on your journey, sir? Just walk us through your journey.
Yeah, I mean, top line is, I used to be in corporate America. So like many of your listeners was working a W-2 job. And the way I got into real estate was really intentional because I was looking for a solution. So if you go back to around 2007, 2008, I was working in Detroit at an automotive company, and we ended up going through bankruptcy. And being there at that time, I watched a lot of my peers who did not have a plan B. I did not have a plan B, and it was really stressful. The anxiety was through the roof. And I distinctly recall one individual who sat pretty much right in front of me, kind of kitty corner in front of me. And he unfortunately lost his job, and he had been with the company for 22 years. He's what we call a lifer. And his plan was work there till he got to at least 25 years, if not 30 years, retire, get the gold watch, get the pension, all that stuff. He got let go at 22 years, which was premature to get the pension and all the retirement packages. And he left a voicemail to everybody on the floor with his disdain and his frustration. And I remember listening to that voicemail and feeling a great deal of just empathy for what he was going through. But I also realized that wasn't isolated to any individual him, and I wasn't, anything special. I mean, we all think we're special, but the reality is corporate America doesn't care. I mean, you could be, C-suite officer, you can rise up the ranks, but at some point your number may get called, or you may just decide it's not the right fit anymore, and you got to have a plan B. So that realization hit me pretty hard. And I realized I wanted a plan B. I remember reading Real Estate or Rich Dad, Poor Dad prior to that. So I went back and reread that book, and real estate was the thing that jumped out to me. So at that moment, I started trying to create that path on real estate. Now, it took me some time. So if you're not exactly where you want to be as a real estate investor, don't worry. Your journey is your journey. Your race is your race. But that was the moment that I really committed to becoming a real estate investor. It took another 2 years before I moved to Chicago and bought my first piece of real estate, and ultimately started to scale the portfolio from there. If you fast forward a little bit, I was still in corporate America, working in raising money for deals and finding opportunities. And ultimately, I was able to leave my W-2 job. My wife and I, run the business. She still kind of is a professional in her own world, but I was able to leave and kind of focus on growing this business. And to date, we've invested over $120 million worth of apartment buildings. So we've been able to work with other investors, help other people, get passive income through real estate, particularly multifamily, and continue to grow that side of the business.
John, what motivates you to start investing in multifamily properties specifically?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I began my journey and got committed to invest in real estate, I read books. I don't know if I listened to that many podcasts back then, because I'm not sure podcasts were out in 2010, at least the ones that I was listening to. But I did, come across any information I could find. So a lot of books, articles that I could read. I started trying to find events to attend and going to those events. And everyone I came across, every book I read, every article I read, anyone who had built a large portfolio, they talked about wishing they had started in multifamily as opposed to beginning in single family. So after kind of coming to that realization, I just decided to start a multifamily. And we started with small multifamily, a 2-unit building, which we house hacked. At that time, that wasn't the term that was used, but I lived in a duplex. We rented out the other unit, and that worked really well for us. From there, we bought a 3-unit building. That was a pure rental, and that worked really well. And then I wanted to get into commercial multifamily because those properties had worked, and I wanted to scale. And the reason I wanted to focus on multifamily instead of maybe single family houses or some other asset class is I understood what it meant to be a renter. I had been a renter pretty much my whole life to some degree, coming from college and even when I was, younger. So I understood what it meant to live in a unit and pay somebody rent. So that concept kind of made sense to me. Even renting a house, like I had never rented a house before, so I really didn't quite grasp that concept as much. And then living in a city like Chicago, where pretty much everybody rents, especially, in the city, that made a lot of sense. So it was very familiar from being on the other side of that equation. It was just a matter of learning what that looked like. And I would say the last component for me was when you have multiple units, it really does mitigate your risk. When you have one house, that house is either, it's either occupied or it's vacant. They either paid rent this month or they didn't pay rent this month. When you have multiple units, well, now maybe one person moved out or one person didn't pay rent, but you still have income from the other units. So that made it a bit more predictable. And as you scale that from maybe a duplex or a 3-unit building to say, 20 units or 100 units, well, now you really can predict the cash flow situation. You can project it. And with my background in business, working in marketing, working for large corporations, that actually was easier for me because I could sit there and look at it and almost put it onto a 12-month projection calendar and say, okay, hey, we're going to be a little light in these months where we may have more turnovers, we may have some more expenses, but these months should be pretty solid. So let's make sure we have extra savings or extra money in reserves for these months. So I could run it like a real business with that forecasting, and that was much easier for me to wrap my head around. Versus when I had the 2-unit, I mean, I knew when the leases ended, but if someone decided, oh, I got a great job in some other state, I'm going to leave and break my lease. Well, now I've got to go figure that out right there, as opposed to, being able to take a look at it and run it more like a business or an organization.
John, you mentioned house hacking. This is how you started, right? Now you're looking at managing about $100 million worth of apartment investments. Is that safe to say? You did mention that.
Yeah,
Right?
we've worked with it. We've sold off some of those assets. So I think our current assets under management is closer to 40 or 45 million. But yes.
Okay. So let's just stay a little bit more on like from house hacking.
Yeah.
What was the next deal and the following deal, and how did you get to 100 million at one point, right? I understand that now you sold some, but you were at some point at 100 million.
Well,
Walk us through the journey a little bit more.
yeah. So from the
Detail.
2-unit, this, that was really the test, right? And in my mind, I was almost stacking the deck because I was living in one unit and renting out the other. My options were pay rent somewhere else. And in actuality, what happened was we were looking for a house hack, we're looking for a property. We couldn't find one. So we actually got to the point where we said, you know what, let's just renew our lease at our apartment and then we'll keep looking in the meantime. And our landlord came back and said, at first he said, great, no problem. And they came back a few days later and said, hey, I spoke to my wife and that's not going to work. So they were pregnant, expecting her first child. And his wife was really concerned with him trying to rent this vacant unit or because we were just going to do a month-to-month lease. So he was really concerned with that. And he said, you guys either sign a 1-year lease or you got to move. So that put some pressure on us to find a place. And we ended up finding one that we liked and we bought that. But part of the way I reconciled that for me was, well, we were going to pay $1,500 in rent anyway. So if buying this property allowed me to pay less than $1,500 a month, I was winning, right? And eventually, or essentially, that property, we got about $1,400 in rent from the first floor unit. We obviously were living in the other unit, so we weren't making any money there, but we were only paying $900 out of pocket. So in my mind, hey, we're netting $600 a month based on our alternatives. The reality is we were actually creating a lot of equity though, because we renovated our unit. So about a year or two later, we actually refinanced the property and we had created over $100,000 in equity in that property. So that freed us up to do a lot of different things. In the meantime, we were saving money. So we actually went out, we bought a 3-unit building. That 3-unit building cash flowed out of the gate, gave us a lot of opportunities there. And then we continued to save our money. And we ultimately bought an 8-unit building 2 years later, using some of the funds that we had earned from that first project. And that 8-unit building was very intentional because that 2-unit was kind of let's see how this real estate thing works, right? Because it's one thing to listen to somebody on podcasts. It's one thing to listen to, to read a book or to, read an article. But I didn't really know anyone who was investing in real estate. And for me, this was still kind of risky in my mind, right? I still had some limiting beliefs, but I had seen enough proof points and I had seen enough, testimonials of folks who are doing this successfully. And quite frankly, real estate is so accessible. And a 2-unit building, there were so many 2 units that you run the numbers, you get comfortable, you start to see people who are doing this, and they may not be your friends and family, but you go to these events and you're seeing people who are doing it, and they're telling you how to do it, and now it becomes real. So that 2 unit was really that proof of concept. The 3 unit was really where it had to work because we weren't living there, and this was a pure investment. But once that worked, then we wanted to go up and scale into commercial real estate. I wanted an 8 unit building specifically because I wanted experience managing a property management company. And at this point, I realized this could be a big deal. And the reason that was important to me was, if you go back to what got me into real estate, it was the anxiety and the fear of losing my job, of having my career cut short, where I'm, on the street looking and scrambling to pay my bills. And when I looked at how I was going to achieve it, it was going to be too hard and too long to just save my money, buy a property, save my money, buy a property. At this point, we were about 6 years, about 4 years in, and we had accumulated $1.5 million worth of real estate. But the reality is, I didn't have the cash flow from that real estate to supplement or really take out my W-2 job. We had some equity, which is great. I had 6 figures worth of equity in the one project. But equity doesn't pay bills. And I think that's one important thing for investors to understand, is like, equity is great. It's how you build wealth. You want to accumulate assets, but ultimately you need cash flow if you're going to, leave your W-2 job or you want to do other things. The cash flow gives you flexibility and options. So that's when we realized, what, we really need to scale. The 8 unit was kind of a launching pad to doing that. And at the same time, I found a mentor who could help me really take this to the next level and learn how to raise capital, how to attract capital for these deals that we were finding. And the very next deal we did, it took about another year, year and a half. But the next deal we did was 192 units. And that was a syndication deal. We partnered with a group out of Texas that we had gotten to know over about a year. And they brought us this opportunity, asked us if we wanted to partner with them. And we did. And it comes back to building strong relationships, but also thinking bigger. If you would have brought that opportunity to me after we bought the 3 unit, I would have laughed. Like, there's no way in the world we would think about getting into 192 units, right? But in doing the 8 unit, getting my feet wet with commercial real estate, managing the manager, that also gave me perspective on the people I was meeting. So when I met that group, I think they had managed around 70 units themselves. They were general partners on like another 500 or so units. So when they came and they were starting to be the lead operator, I felt comfortable with their experience based on what I knew and my own experience. So all that's really important to scale. And I think each one of those steps was critical.
John, a couple of questions here. First one, how did you find your mentor?
Man, so I was not looking for a mentor. It's interesting because there's this quote that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that's exactly what happened to me. We bought that 8 unit in November, and in December is when I met the person who became my mentor. And it was intentional in the sense of, I was trying to meet people, but I wasn't looking for a mentor. And if you rewind the clock a little bit, over that summer, I was trying to figure out how to scale. And one of the ways that I was thinking of scaling was to start flipping houses. And I was starting to, I was going to events. I went to like a 3-day seminar type thing, and they were trying to sell you this, $40,000, mastermind course. And my wife and I were seriously considering it. I know sometimes people have negative things to say about that, but, ultimately, I think you've got to figure out what path is best for you. And I knew what I knew. I also knew what I didn't know. And as we considered it, they got really pushy on the sales pitch side of it, and that turned us off. So we just decided to go do more research and figure out what resources we had available to us. And one of those resources was Bigger Pockets. So I actually spent that next day. We didn't go to the third day. We went to the library, and we spent all day researching and checking out books and just putting together kind of a business plan. And one of the things that I made it a point to do was to leverage Bigger Pockets more. So I actually was posting on BP because I was trying to connect with other investors, particularly in markets where I wanted to invest. And Cincinnati was one of those markets. So I made a post asking, hey, I'm coming to Cincinnati. I'm looking to meet with other multifamily investors. Is anybody interested, or who should I talk to? And people kept tagging this one guy. So they tagged him multiple times. So I reached out to him and said, hey, man, I made this post. A lot of people tagged you. I'm coming to Cincinnati. I'd love to meet with local investors. Are you open to grabbing coffee? And he said, sure. And we ended up grabbing coffee. He talked to me about what he was doing and how he had achieved some of the progress that he had achieved at that point. And he told me at this coaching program, and I said, listen, that sounds perfect for where I'm at in my journey and where I want to go next. I wanted to think about it and talk to my wife about it, but ultimately we decided to move forward. And that was pivotal for me because through that, I got to meet his connections and meet some of the other clients he had. And that group that I mentioned to you, those are other clients of his. So we kind of met at a conference. I got to sit down, my wife and I grabbed dinner with him. And it was just really a natural relationship that was built. And we weren't thinking about working together or anything like that. Initially, it was just you meet people, you talk to them, and oh, I like that person. Or, okay, they had a good vibe. They had a lot of good, knowledgeable information to share. And we fast forwarded to when I launched my podcast. They were one of the first groups I had on. As a matter of fact, there was episodes 2 and episode 7. So when I say one of the first groups, I literally mean some of the first groups, right? So episode 2 and episode 7, those are the 2 guys we ended up partnering with on our first deal. So those relationships are key. And again, having that mentor was critical. I would say if you're looking for a mentor, one of the things you want to do is find someone who is active in the space so they can talk to you about real-time strategies. The stuff that people were doing 18 months ago simply isn't working today. And some of those folks are in trouble on some of those projects. The stuff that was working 5, 7, 10 years ago definitely isn't working today. So you want to have somebody who is currently in the business who can help you navigate that. Somebody you can connect with. Does this feel like the kind of person that you would want to, have as a mentor, that you would want to have as a friend? Somebody you'd want to talk to and maybe grab a beer, grab a drink, or invite over for dinner. If you don't feel like that person is someone you can connect with at all, then I wouldn't work with them as a mentor, right? I also think that you need to be really clear on what you want to get out of it. I think too often people, look for a multifamily program or something like that and just sign up and go, but they don't really know what they want out of it. I was really clear on where I needed help. I could find deals to an extent, right? I could manage it. Again, we can always get better, but I felt okay in those things. I had never raised $1 for a deal before. So I was looking for someone who could help me structure a deal with limited partners and investors and who had successfully demonstrated the ability to grow and scale that. And this person had raised $1 million for their first deal, and they had a system and process, and they were going to talk to me about that. So that's what I was paying for. I was paying to learn that system and process for someone who had done that. But we also had a connection. We had similar backgrounds, both in advertising. He was in a market that I was looking to invest in. So I thought it would be advantageous to have somebody who could help me navigate that landscape. And ultimately we felt we just had a good connection. So if you're looking for a mentor, I would say, do you connect with that person? What exactly are you looking for them to help you with? And do they have the ability and the capability to help you address that? And then last, make sure that, they have a track record or they have some ability to actually deliver on the things they're telling you or that you're hoping to get out of it.
John, what's your current headcount of how many units are you totally owning, your group owns?
Yeah, under management right now, I think it's around 400 or 500. Again, we've sold probably 800 or so units over the last couple of years as the market kind of shifted. So we are looking to expand and we're going back into growth mode. We just closed on another asset a couple weeks ago. So we're excited about that and certainly looking for more deals and opportunities now.
Are you self-managing or fee managed? Are you fee managed?
No, we use third party. Yeah, we use third party management.
John, what are some pieces of advice that you would like to share with new investors that just starting on their real estate investment journey and especially on multifamily journey, right? Everybody, I guess, it's very appealing to invest in real estate. I have a couple of properties myself too, but people typically start small, just like, your story. You get a duplex, you get, 3 units here, or you start with a single home, right? Single family home. And then how do you, how do you scale? How do you get to like 50 units or 20 units or 100 or 5,000 units? So I think what are some pieces of advice, first of all, for the very beginners, for those that are looking to invest in real estate, period. And then what are some specific pieces of advice for those that are trying to scale from like just doing a little bit here and a little bit there to get into a multifamily type of deal to scale up?
So let's talk about scaling in a second, right? So starting out, I think the first thing is you have to believe that real estate is a tool that can help you reach your financial goals. And a lot of people don't know what their financial goals actually are, right? And you can write it down to have a numerical goal, but I think you need to at least focus on the outcome you're looking for. Like, what kind of lifestyle are you looking to live? Do you want to be able to have flexibility with your career? What's the goal? Because how you invest in real estate can have a huge impact on what your takeaway is. And I'll give you a clear example. There are a number of people, and you probably know this too, right, who become burnt out landlords. They buy a property, it has a bunch of issues. They're dealing with a lot of tenant challenges. They're fixing up a lot of stuff. They're constantly, running over to the property and putting fires out. And they have a negative view on real estate and real estate investing. And it's not the real estate, right? Their strategy was bad. They tried to do it all, self-managed landlord. And maybe they didn't have the background or the expertise or the knowledge to do that successfully. So I would say start by understanding what your goal is and figure out a strategy that can help you there. If you do want to self-manage, or at least to start out, which I think is a good idea, because it helps you learn, right? It helps you learn the business. I managed my 2-unit, I managed my 3-unit. But when we got to the 8-unit, I wanted to specifically work with another group, but that helped me manage them because I knew what it took to, write a successful leasing ad and put that ad out there and get traffic. And I'm like, hey, we're not getting traffic here. Let me see the ad. Let's rewrite the copy, right? Like, hey, you're not highlighting the key features. Let me see the unit. Like, we're showing, like, is the unit clean? Is like, you don't get this stuff and understand it unless you do it yourself, right? So I think there's great value in that, but I also think you have to stay focused on your strategy to transition and to be able to, step up. There's a great book called 10X is better than 2X, or easier than 2X. And one of the concepts it gets into is that you have to identify the 20% that is going to help you scale the most and be able to relieve and walk away from the 80% of things that are holding you back. And a lot of people can't scale, and we'll come back to that in a moment, but a lot of people can't scale because they're not willing to let go of the 80%. So the first thing is identify what your goals are and your strategy is so that you can stay true to that approach. Get started. Too many people just analyze and try to figure out everything, and they'll talk themselves out of a deal. If the numbers work, I would say starting out, when I say numbers work, I mean that you're not going to lose money. Protect your downside. Find a deal that has a high floor, even if the ceiling's not as high, because that's going to help you build confidence. That's going to help you, pay your bills and get some momentum going in the deal. Getting into deals that are risky, flip projects, development projects as your first initiative, I would caution that. If you have the background, by all means, do it. But if that's not your background, if that's not your skill set, look for something that has a higher floor and just move forward. Don't expect to hit a home run on the first deal, but get something to start building your experience, building up your confidence, but also building up your network. Now, when you're ready to scale, scaling requires you to focus on the things that actually are working well for you. So what's the most productive use of your time? Where are you strongest? Where do you have a unique skill set that can help you get to the next level? For me, my background was in marketing. So I understood how to kind of create a personal brand and how to connect with other people. And I'm not saying I wanted to necessarily do these things, but my goals and what I wanted to do required me to do more than just, reach out to a handful of people in my existing network. So because of that, I felt pretty comfortable doing things like a podcast and getting in front of people, hosting events, and allowing me to focus on growing my network to, yes, help find deals, but also to attract capital for the deals that we were doing. So figure out what that is for you. Maybe it's management, maybe it's operations, maybe you're an awesome project manager, but figure out where you're uniquely positioned to add value to deals and figure out how to do more of that, and then build your team where you have the rest of those components supplemented and you're not taking on all that work. The reality is, if you're going to scale a large portfolio, you have to have a team around you. You cannot scale a portfolio by yourself. You have to have a great, whether it be project manager, property manager, contractor, real estate agent, attorney, folks who have the capital, whatever it is. You can't be great at all those things. Like, I've never met somebody who's doing every single one of those things great by themselves, no one else on the team. It just doesn't happen. Even if you were great at all of that, the time it would take you would drive you crazy. And you would only be able to do so many deals because it takes so much time to check all those different boxes and responsibilities. So it is very important to find people who have the skill sets to do these various things so you can build your team and scale.
John, you mentioned your background in marketing. So there's three things that I want to touch on. First is personal branding. The second is networking. And then the third is influencer marketing. So let's just take them one at a time, right? Let's talk about the importance of building a personal brand. Tell us a little bit about your take on this. How important is it that you build personal brand?
I think it's critical to build a personal brand. And when I say personal brand, I'm not necessarily talking about creating content and posting on social media and all that. A personal brand is just what people think of you when you're not there in the room. So, if you think about, let's say there was a job opening, do people think of you or do they think of someone else, right? That's part of your personal brand. If someone needed a doctor, someone needed, a CPA, they're going to think of someone who probably carries those titles because it's part of their personal brand. So, or you're going to think of someone who knows a lot of people. Hey, you should call Susan. Susan's well connected, and she probably has a great CPA for you. That's a part of your personal brand. It's not necessarily that they're going to do business with you. It's, what do people perceive you as? Do they perceive you as trustworthy, knowledgeable, connected? All these things are part of our personal brand, right? So there are communications and things that we can do to help influence that, right? We can tell people what we do and, all these kind of things. But the personal brand, as far as someone trusting you and liking you and recommending you, that's going to be based on how they feel about you and not necessarily what you say. So we all should be building a personal brand because we want people to think about us in a certain way or remember us for certain opportunities or keep us in mind for certain things. I'll give you one example of that that's nothing to do with investing. One of my goals and values is to be a present father. And the way that starts to show up externally is I get pretty involved in my kids' activities and I end up coaching way more than I planned on, but I end up coaching some of my kids' sports, right? So I coached a flag football team and we did really well. We won kind of the championship, whatever. And one of the moms came up to me afterwards and said, "You were such a great coach. You should coach the other football team." And they had like a tackle football team. And I was like, I didn't know they had tackle football. I was kind of surprised by it. And that's a whole other topic. But this woman didn't really, I mean, she knows me from coaching her son in this team, but clearly I had, through that interaction, I had established myself as a coach. Now, I didn't plan on being a coach, right? This was one of those things where they always ask, "Hey, we need some volunteers," blah, blah, blah. They ask all the time, right? And I just raised my hand. But in her mind, right, that brand that I've developed to her is John's a coach. John coaches young kids in sports. So that's her connection to me. Now, we got to know each other a little bit later and found out we're both in real estate, right? She had no idea I was in real estate at that time. So that personal brand is going to be different based on everyone's interaction and kind of the lens they have with you. But that was the personal brand I gave. But she trusted me enough to say, "Hey, you did such a good job here. I think you should coach this broader team." And I just thought it was a one-off conversation, by the way. So I just said, I just won't bring it up again. This will disappear. Guess what? I got an email 2 months later, and my name was in there as a person identified to coach this team. And then I had to go to this meeting. I ended up coaching the team now. But the point is, that's a personal brand. Again, we think about a personal brand as posting content on social media. A personal brand is how other people see you. And how they see you is really, really important. So I think it's critical that you take the time to build a personal brand and cultivate that, right? If I, to say that story differently, if I volunteered to coach, but I really had no desire to coach and do that, it probably would have came across a little bit differently, or I would have absolutely said flat out no when I was offered. But more than likely, I would have been given the opportunity because she would have seen that, yeah, I don't think he really trusts us, right? I put a lot of time and effort into it, which is why we won our title. And because of that, she could tell this guy has a passion for this because I have a passion for teaching and coaching and helping people, right? Especially young people. But I have a passion for that. I think it's really important for them to have that foundation. And she saw that. So that wasn't my communication. There was nothing I did. I didn't put an ad together and tell her, "Hey, I'm an awesome dad," or "I'm an awesome father figure," or I'm an awesome leader. She saw that, right? And that was kind of the personal brand. So I think it's really important for us to be aware of what we're putting out there to people. To give another version of this story, how do you show up in the world? Do you communicate? Are you on time? Are you reliable? Do you have good manners? Are you respectful? All these things are part of your personal brand. Again, it has nothing to do with content creation. But if I'm talking to someone and they ask, hey, what do you think of John? All those little things I just mentioned are going to be a part of what they think of me. Oh, John always follows up, or, hey, John was pretty timely. Or they might say, you know what? I had something going on. I never even heard from this guy, or he didn't show up to the meeting, right? I wanted to talk to him about investing. I never heard from him. All those things are going to come and develop a personal brand. And that's why you and I can have completely different opinions about a brand. If I said Nike or Mountain Dew, some of the brands I worked on, one person may love it, the other person may despise it, because that's still based on your own personal interaction with it and your personal connection. So it's really important for us to cultivate a personal brand, because that's what other people are going to see in the way they talk about us when we're not in the room.
John, I'd like to get your take next on the importance of networking. How important is networking in being a real estate investor, and how does it lead to how did it lead to creation of Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Networking is vital. If you're looking to scale, it's vital. Listen, if you just want to buy a 2-unit and maybe buy 1-2 unit every couple of years, you don't need to network. Completely fine with that. If you want to scale a portfolio and get into the tens of millions of dollars, or scale something larger than that, you're going to need connections. You need connections to find deals. You're going to need potential partners. You're going to need investors. So you have to build these connections. So for me, one of the things that I realized as I was starting to scale my portfolio is that everything that I had, all the deals that we were doing, I could trace back to a key connection. And I'll give you a clear example. We just talked about that 192 unit. I met that group at a conference, found out they were connected to my mentor, right? And that allowed us to build on a relationship and ultimately partner together. The second deal that I did was another group that I met out in person and met them at a conference as well. So I looked at how I was making these connections and how impactful it was on my business. And as a matter of fact, I was sitting with a friend of mine. The person actually is my co-partner on the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. We were at an event in San Francisco, the San Francisco Bay Summit, and we were talking about how important these events were for us personally, just to scale, to grow, to challenge our thinking, to expand our minds. And in doing that, we said, we never get this close to us. We've got to come out here to California, or I've got to go out to Colorado, or maybe out in Florida. But we never have these kind of things in the Midwest. And our goal was to create something in the Midwest, because the only thing that came in the Midwest were, again, those pitch fest type events where you have the HGTV gurus come on and try to sell you a $30,000, $40,000 program. And the thing that was awesome about the events we were going to is they were pitch free. No one's trying to sell you anything. So you would go there and you could really focus on learning, and you could focus on making connections. And that was great for me, because I could let my guard down and I can ask better questions. And I didn't feel like I was about to get, sharked and sold something. And I could just sit there and be myself. And that allowed me to really grow and expand and trust. And I just thought that was really vital. So the networking for me was key. We did our first conference. Part of that was to grow and expand my relationships in the region. So, from that first event, we had a number of speakers that I was able to build some strong connections with, folks who are very well known in the space, but also some of the attendees. Some of those attendees became investors. Some became key principals who partner with me on some of the deals that we have. So it's really important to connect and expand. And I would say, too, one of the big limiting beliefs that a lot of people have is, well, I don't want to try to raise money for deals because I don't know people with money, or I'm not comfortable asking those people for money. And the reality is that you don't have to ask people for money. You don't have to know people who have money right now, because you have to surround yourself with people who are looking for these kind of investments. So it's almost like matchmaking. When you attend these events, you don't have to convince these people about how real estate investing can help them reach their financial goals. They know, that's why they're there. right? They may have a different problem. Maybe they've got money, but they don't have access to deals, or they don't have the time to invest in these deals. So they're looking to connect with someone like you if you have the ability to find deals and manage those deals, and you just need capital partners. Some of them are doing that themselves, but they want to diversify. So, hey, I've got a portfolio maybe in Florida, but I'd love to have some of the cash flow in the Midwest. So I'm going to put some of my money over here, and that's how I'm going to diversify. I don't want to put it in the stock market, or maybe I still have stuff in the stock market, but I want to get some of the cash flow that we have in this market, or maybe I have great cash flow and I want to put some money into some development projects, or some projects that may have greater appreciation. So real estate investors believe in the power of real estate investing. And that's a beautiful thing that sometimes people, they oversee, right? They think that, hey, I've got to go after doctors and engineers. But the reality is my largest investors are other real estate investors. We certainly have doctors and engineers and IT professionals who invest with us. But when you think about it, the person who believes in the power of real estate investing is going to be able to move faster than someone who is still wrapping their head around all the risk and rewards that come with real estate.
John, I want to shift the conversation a little bit. It's something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that has to do with your previous background in marketing, right?
Yeah.
You have experience in overseeing large marketing campaigns for companies like General Motor, Nike, or Coors Light. So I do want to ask you, influencer marketing, is this a thing? What's your opinion of influencer marketing? Is that an effective way for brands to associate themselves with industry influencers, or like worldwide influencers in general? And how does that benefit the brand, if it benefits in any way? Have you seen it done effectively?
So I think influencer marketing can be a term that carries some weight and maybe a little baggage to it. So I'll break down what I think you're asking. Um, let's use Nike as an example you just gave, right? Part of the way Nike has been able to stand out for the last almost 40 years has been through building strong relationships with athletes. There's the movie Air that, tells the story of Nike signing Michael Jordan and the impact that had on their business to become not just the number one basketball shoe in the world, but to really catapult their business. Back then, at that time, they were way behind Adidas and Converse when it came to shoe sales in total. And they weren't even on the map when it came to basketball shoes. But signing a guy like Michael Jordan and putting together a business plan around that allowed them to catapult and also become the number one player in that space. If you look at what Nike has done since then, it's always been about the athletes, from Tiger Woods to LeBron James to Serena Williams and all these other great athletes that they've had under contract and are part of the Nike family. That's their entire business plan for the most part, right? It's get great athletes and demonstrate that this is the pinnacle, when it comes to Nike. So their whole business is built off of influencer marketing. That's kind of the extreme version, right? Hiring an athlete, sponsorship agreement, you do X, Y, Z with us. There's a more subtle approach. And I would argue that what you and I are doing right now is another form of influencer marketing, right? We share value by you having me as a guest on this show. There's a value exchange that we both have. You're telling your audience, your listeners, hey, I'm a credible guy. I'm getting John Casmon, these guys who've invested, in multiple deals and larger portfolio type play deals. That's going to help build a little credibility to you. Likewise, to me, I have a stage to share what we're doing and how we're influencing people, right? So the influencer marketing thing, there's a lot of layers to it, and it can cross over. When I was starting with my podcast, that's exactly what I was looking to do, right? I was looking to learn. I was looking to talk to people who can help educate me and help me build my confidence, build my credibility. But also, I got to a point where, man, look at these amazing guests that I was able to have. I had, my mentor, Joe Fearless, and had, so many other big, Jasmine Star, who was, I don't know where she's at now, but she had at the time 400,000 Instagram followers, and she talked about the power of social media, and so many other great guests who could share this knowledge and share this information, that it made me kind of a credible source to say, hey, I have the ability to go bring in these experts and share this story. And guess what? The truth is, you do become an expert when you spend all your days talking to these people and learning from them. Joe Rogan's a great example of that, right? I don't think anybody would go back 5-10 years and say Joe Rogan is one of the most intelligent people on the planet, but Joe Rogan talks to some of the sharpest, most creative, most knowledgeable experts in every field all day. Joe knows a little bit about everything because he talks to all the experts. So the best way to be a teacher is to be a student. When you learn, and then when you can teach other people, that helps you grow and scale. And a lot of what we're doing, it comes down to educating people about, why multifamily, how to invest in multifamily, what to look out for, and all those kind of things. Taking it out of our multifamily world when it comes to influencer marketing, again, I think some people have a misperception because it feels like it's manipulative. And I would say that there's got to be an authentic approach to it. If you're truly sharing knowledge and education and inspiration and information, then there should be nothing manipulative about it. But if you're just getting somebody to say anything, and they don't really believe in the product or service, or they're not really involved in it, then that's where it can be bad. So I believe in influencer marketing to the extent that it's authentic and people sharing authentic stories and experiences, and it helps people quickly establish the credibility that is true. And I'll go back to the podcasting thing. You may not know anything else about me, right? But if you go and check out my podcast, you can see that we've released a new episode every Tuesday for the last 6 years, and every Thursday for the last, 3+ years, if not 4 years. So, I'm consistent. I show up. I've done enough to deliver and say one of my priorities is putting out this show consistently. So again, we go back to building a personal brand. That gives you a little bit of a glimpse into my commitment level, at least to this show, right? That may not tell you anything about how my deals are going, but at least shows you that I'm showing up every day, right? I'm showing up. So all those things start to carry some weight when it comes to being an influencer or influencer marketing. And I would say that it's really important for brands or personalities to watch who we connect with and have a strategy around it. Going back to Nike, Nike doesn't take every athlete in the world, right? They want the best of the best. They're willing to pay a premium for the best of the best athletes. If you have a different kind of company, figure out who that right and ideal person is that represents your brand, that represents what you do. Testimonials is kind of a different approach to influencer marketing, but it has the same concept, right? People use the product, had a great experience with it, and they share their experience with other people, so that ideally they will want to participate and be involved in that as well. So influencer marketing is a great tool. I would say, just like anything else, it's a tool. Figure out where it can help you and make sure that you do it in a way that is authentic to the connections you want to have.
John, you did mention your podcast a few times, right? So Multifamily Insights is the podcast, and you're doing 2 episodes a week now?
2 episodes a week, yes.
Yeah. You drop one on Tuesday, one on Thursday. If someone...
One Friday. Tuesday and Friday.
Yeah. Oh, Tuesday and Friday, sorry. So if someone is new, right, to this, and they're watching this episode or listening to it in the future, what are some things that they would learn from the podcast? What are some general topics, right? You mentioned some big names that you had on the show, but what are some generally the topics, the type of topics that you have on the show?
Yeah, we talk a lot about when it comes to multifamily investing, we're going to talk about finding deals, analyzing deals a little bit. It's hard to get deep into analyzing deals on a podcast. That's a little bit more of a visual type things with numbers, but definitely give you some conceptual things to look out for. We talk a lot about raising capital and creating kind of systems to attract capital for your deals. We talk a lot about some of the little known structures and things to look out for from a tax standpoint, from a legal standpoint, getting CPAs and accountants on there, talking about depreciation and some of those kind of strategies. I would say the show is really built for that listener who is ready to scale into larger multifamily. And larger just means, I would say 10+ units. If you've got a couple duplexes, some single families, maybe you got a triplex, and you're ready to scale into double digits, the show can help you do that. We're going to talk about people's journeys, how they went from, 5 units to 50 units. We talk about mindset a lot. What did it take for you to overcome some of the challenges? The fact that, you had some setbacks in life. We have a round of insights, our ROI series, where we get into some of the psychographic things, challenges, obstacles, failures that help people lead to greater success. We talk about daily habits that people have that help them achieve their goals, where they stack their day, resources that they use, both digital as well as books that they highly recommend. So all these things kind of help people get the insights necessary to be a successful multifamily investor.
I hope that a lot of our listeners right here will, get redirected towards your podcast. Sounds like you have some great things going on over there. Next thing, John, I want to talk a little bit about current economical context and opportunities for the future. The current context, everybody knows, interest rates are going through the roof. A lot of investors got into variable rates type of deals. They're not able to make payments. They're going to lose the properties. I think that's a pretty obvious thing for everybody that's watching our multifamily arena. So that's gonna translate into opportunities for others that have been conservative, have been really good with their money, and investments for grow the portfolios and buy deals at cents per dollar. What is your personal take on what I just described, and how do you position yourself to take advantage of what's gonna come probably within the next 6 to 18 months?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? This is one of the questions that comes up very often in our mastermind group that we run. And a lot of our clients and students are trying to figure the same thing out, right? How do I position myself to take advantage of some of these opportunities? And I think the first thing is it goes back to networking and building those relationships, talking to brokers, talking to not just, real estate agents and brokers, but also talking to mortgage brokers. You talked about the variable rate loans that investors have taken out over the last few years. Well, a lot of them are reaching out to these mortgage brokers to find out what their options are. So they may have some insights to deals that are going to be in trouble, that may not pencil out, that may not get the relief they're looking for. And maybe they can make some connections or introductions if you have a genuine relationship with these people. So I think the first thing you can do is try to strengthen your relationships with key players in the business right now. The second thing you can do is make sure you are doing what I call our 3 C's, right? And this is how you attract capital for deals, but also how you prepare yourself to do deals. First thing is going to be building up your credibility. Who on your team has the experience to do what it is you're trying to do. If you don't have those people in your team right now, get them, because the last thing you want is to find a great opportunity, but not be able to get the seller or the broker to believe you're the right buyer for that opportunity. So if you need to go bring in some partners, or you need to bring in your property management team, so you're ready to go and you've done your research and you're positioned for that, you need to build up that team now. The second thing you need to do is build up your confidence. When you talk about, the deal structure, I'm sure all those people are pretty confident, 2 years ago and 18 months ago, when they did those deals. When I say confidence, I'm not talking about false bravado or faking it till you make it. I'm talking about real confidence that comes from being prepared, asking these kind of questions, doing your due diligence, running through kind of a torture test on your deals and looking at it to say, okay, if this situation happens, what we do, how do I pivot? Does this deal cash flow? How much money do we have in reserves? If you're not taking the time to understand those kind of intricate details and having, those questions when you're putting together your business plan, then you're gonna lack some confidence, because in the back of your mind, whether you verbally state it or not, you're gonna be wondering if you missed something. And you want to make sure that you take the time to build that confidence authentically, meaning you're actually doing this work and not just guessing and hoping, but you're asking yourself this question, and you are going to underwrite the deal multiple ways, and you are going to figure out, what the minimum risk tolerance is for this deal to be successful. That's going to help you tremendously. And then the third kind of goes back to connections. We talked about, the networking, but the other thing is you want to make sure you have your capital partners kind of lined up and ready to go. Some people are going to be spooked by the current environment, right? You talk about interest rates going up. They may have other investments that are not paying them or not working out as well. So maybe they're going to sit tight and wait. So you need to talk to more people and build more connections with people so they understand not just that you're still looking for opportunities, but how you're planning on mitigating the risk based on the changing market environment. So those are the things that I would do. First and foremost, stay connected with those industry professionals. Focus on, actually building up that credibility with your team and all the work that you're doing, making sure that you have, great confidence in your preparation, that you're asking the right questions. And one question you may want to ask is, what can go wrong in this deal? And if you ask yourself that question through that lens, when you're evaluating opportunity, you should be able to identify what the risk is and then mitigate that risk and how you're planning on approaching it. And again, making sure that you've got capital kind of lined up, capital partners lined up. And I would say, you got to be more conservative than you were maybe in years past. There are going to be more people who are going to sit out on the sidelines and just decide not to invest. So you're going to have more conversations with more people.
John, amazing conversation. Thank you for taking the time to share some of the wisdom with us here today at Multifamily Chronicles. In closing, I'd like to give you the opportunity to share some closing thoughts or maybe answer a question you wish I would have asked and I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is just understanding what your next step is, right? I hope you got great value out of this conversation, but I hope it doesn't end when we hang up here. The next step for a lot of people needs to be something they can identify. And I would say whether you need help with your confidence, whether you need help with your credibility, connections, where do you need to go from here to get real value out of this conversation? And for many people, it's identifying that tangible next step. And it may be someone in their network. And I would say that you can do one of two things. Share this episode with someone who you think can get value from this conversation. But also take the next step. Reach out to me, reach out to Adrian. Let us know you enjoyed this conversation. Let us know what you're working on, and let us know how we might be able to help you. We do have some resources on our website available. You can go to casmoncapital.com. We have a sample deal package available. We have information on our podcast, information on our mastermind. So all that information is available, but it's up to you to take that next step. It's you can listen all you want, but if you're really truly committed to scaling your portfolio and taking that next step, you have to take action. So those are some really easy action steps you could take. We're not telling you to go put something in a contract, but go talk to somebody, leave a review, tell us that you got great value out of this, share this episode, subscribe to Multifamily Insights, but do something where you create this environment where you're surrounded by people who can help you succeed. And that is the best way for you to grow.
John, besides your website that you mentioned in your podcast, are there any other ways for our listeners to get in touch with you, to get a hold of you?
Yeah, those are the easiest ways. You can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, but I would say if you go to the website, you'll get a sense of kind of the different content we have available. We have a library of workshops and webinars and our mastermind groups, so stuff we've been recording for over a year. So there's a lot of great, valuable stuff there. So I think the most valuable way to reach out is actually through the website, but certainly you can reach out on LinkedIn as well.
John Casmon, it was a pleasure having you here today, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time with us, and hopefully we could do another one in the future. Amazing.
Adrian, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching us today, taking an hour of your busy day to listen to us or, watch us. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Danila, and I hope to see you back here soon. Have a great day.